welcome to another Home Alone conversation with John Butler. A slightly different format today, John. We've got a guest, a remote guest from Tennessee, Scotty Huff from Tennessee.
Would you post a video where you highlight the positive things you see in humanity and the brighter side instead of the dark side of humanity? Would you be willing to do that?
So something positive, John, Scotty's asking for.
Oh, Scotty, you are putting me through the mill, aren't you, my dear? I'll have to watch my P's and Q's. Be careful what I say. Now then, do you mind if I introduce the word law? L-A-W, that sort of law. Well, to the best of human understanding, everything works under law. There is a consequence to our actions, cause and effect. You know, if we put our finger in a fire, we get burnt, don't we? So, if you're going to think of God as the prime, I think the right word's rather a long word, I use it correctly, instigator, the first initiator, the creator of law. It's God's law then that we scream with pain when we put our finger in the fire. You know, the consequences of law can often be very unpleasant indeed. Well, the old story, and actually we can see it enacted in our own experience, is that if we transgress the law, the results are often unpleasant. We get put in prison, don't we, in human terms. If one has any inkling at all of spirit, the fact that there's more to man than this mortality destined to die, there is at least the possibility of immortality, of unlimited existence, or at least less limited existence, then you can see that we swing as on a seesaw between what you could call freedom and loss of freedom, between happiness and unhappiness, between things going well and things going badly, which, if one inquires into it all, is governed by law. And the more you inquire, the more clearly you see the workings of law. It's now the end of February. The sun is climbing higher every day and the first buds are appearing on the trees. This is law, isn't it? When the sun is at its bottom in the middle of winter, the buds keep quiet, keep dormant. In another month or two, everything will start growing. This is law. So yes, all aspects of humanity, both admirable and not so admirable, are, you can say, part of God's will, God's law. Well, the first consequence of the first transgression, at least as recounted in the Bible, is that man is condemned to die. The wages of sin is death. And the consequence of man straying from his primal state, which is spirit, before this spirit became imprisoned in the limits of the flesh, which really is a very limited form of life compared to the freedom of spirit. The first consequence of losing the immortality of spirit, and if you're not too sure of what I'm saying, then just think of the presence, the stillness, which I'll keep referring to in these videos. This stillness is ever present, isn't it? My body gets older and older and older, But this stillness doesn't change at all. It doesn't age. It is immortal. This body is mortal. The stillness is immortal. If you want a further example, if you look in my eyes, and if my eyes aren't too flitting around between all the different images in front of me on the screen, which I find terribly muddling because I don't really know what I'm meant to be looking at. Phil tells me there's a little spot on the iPad over there that I'm meant to look at, but of course I keep wandering all over the place, not sure who I'm meant to look at. And yes, if between these silly eyes of mine you can discern something of light, then that light is not aging, is it? The light is not as old as my grey beard, is it? In fact, you might see something of a eternal sparkle in my eyes. Of course, at every level of existence, even a body in a grave has its wonder, isn't it? I mean, the very process of dying, anybody's been lucky enough to watch someone dying, it's a miraculous process, isn't it? There's even, if you've got eyes to see, you can see beauty at every stage of human existence. Admirable, miraculous things. Just consider a hand, just look at a hand and what a miracle it is. This hand of mine's been functioning for 83 years and it still works. Amazing. Think of all the things your hands have done or your feet have done for all your life, and it keeps on working. Well, what a wonderful thing that is. So there's no shortage of admirable things to find at every level of existence. You only got to look at a handful of soil and look at the miracle of soil. Look at water, look at anything, and you'll find things to wonder at, things to admire in it. So it's not that any level is less admirable than others, but as we ascend in consciousness towards spirit, it becomes a good word really to describe it is, it becomes more glorious. The whole human existence, what man is, its true reality, is so glorious that this mortal frame is even to be kind to it is nothing more than a shadow, a passing shadow of the true man. So in comparison to what man really is, what we find on earth really is a travesty of man's true potential. If you know no better, if your horizon is limited to the human scene, then of course there's much to marvel at. When you open up to what's yet more marvellous, then it's not that one's dismissive of the human condition, it's just that there's so much better. It's a very poor substitute for the reality of man. Well, what is it that we can find in man's mortal condition that is admirable? Well, the first thing, of course, is this yearning in every human heart for something better. Where does that instinct come from? Why is it that almost whatever we consider in human experience, almost instinctively we search for improvement, don't we? You search, when at election time you elect what you hope will be a better government, don't you? You choose a better alternative. When you go shopping in the supermarket, you look for the best bargain, don't you? When you look down a menu, you choose what you think will be the best, what will suit your tummy best. You go on to the more complicated realm of relationships. So, and this is really the proof that there's more to life than meets the eye, that we have an instinctive knowledge that we come from something better. That's why would we search for? So have this instinctive search for it, to go on a better holiday, for a more fulfilling experience. When we get glimpses of freedom, for example, you yearn for yet greater freedom. You don't want the holiday to end, do you? You get a little bit of freedom, you get a little bit of love, and you want more of it, don't you? Satisfied for a while, but then you want more. This you could say, I would suggest, is certainly something to be esteemed in the human condition. This striving for improvement. And in our own lives, indeed, we put it into practice as far as we can, don't we? We usually aspire, even if it doesn't work out in practice, to be kind. Kindness is a very important thing, because kindness is, well, you don't need me to tell you what kindness is. Kindness can make almost any situation bearable, can't it? A kind touch, a kind smile, just a gentle, kind smile can transform somebody's life.
If I can echo Scotty's emphasis, John, on looking for the good, the fact that we can aspire to something better does not necessarily mean that we denigrate that which came before.
It all depends what we're aiming at, doesn't it? Yes, I don't really like any negative words. I always have a sort of an instinctive drawing back when to words like control or denigrate or anything that dismisses anything really in this world. Because as I appreciate ever more the beauty of God's law, so I see the validity of everything, even plastic rubbish and, or the worst aspects of what we judge to be the worst aspects of man, when all human judgment is very questionable. Generosity. They're usually, the good qualities are always to do with less of me, unselfishness. Because you see, it's the me, this separate thing we call the ego, which is really the cause of all our trouble. So the less we have of it, the better. And that's really summed up by the word unselfishness. The ego lives for itself, is self-seeking. What's in it for me? Unselfishness thinks, what can I do to make life better for others as well? How can I leave the world better than I found it? And this can be from the most ordinary, humble things, like wiping the tabletop after a meal. I'm not so admiring of human cleverness. I'm a bit suspicious of that. I much more admire humility, much more. I think a painting of a leaf, a beautiful leaf on a piece of paper might excite my admiration even more. Simple things, squeeze of a hand. I remember when they first sent rockets to the moon, I think, a long time ago. I remember someone making the comment. There was a discussion whether it was good or bad and whether it was worth anything, what benefit to the human race. Someone used the expression "clever devils." Well, cleverness doesn't necessarily mean goodness, does it? Cleverness can be applied to all sorts of things. You know, it's interesting that the first commandment, we're not told to use our intelligence to figure out what God is, are we? We're told to love God. That makes sense to me.
Speaking of goodness, John, we're all familiar with the Genesis creation account, where God is the instigator of goodness. He gets through the first 6 days, including creating man in his image, and the Bible says, and he considered all his works and saw that it was very good.
And then he made man, didn't he?
Man had already been made.
Man hadn't fallen at that stage. You see, it's not that the story of man's fall and consequent troubles, it's all under law. You see, God told man what not to do, and man did it. So, consequence, he disobeyed, and been reaping the consequences ever since. He dies. This is why we die. And also, quoting from the Bible, there's a very interesting verse where somebody called Jesus good teacher, I think. Jesus answered, "Call no man good. There's none good but God." I often think of that. I think we're on very thin ice, really, when we talk too much about good people. I think I don't like being called good myself. I feel much safer to consider myself a sinner and a failure than a success and good in any sense. I have quite a strong awareness of, I hope I do, of my rather focus on my faults rather than my better side, maybe. And also, the Bible is also very clear about this world being the world of darkness, and under the dominion of the devil, which of course is the ego, which is me. The ego is this corrupt thing that dies. All these things become so much clearer if one gets lifted up into spirit. When you get up into what I call the big country, the higher levels of consciousness, then you see so obviously that the world really is a pit of darkness with glimmerings of light in it, and these glimmerings of light are those that are got sufficient impetus to reach up. I keep coming back. You see, ask yourself over and over and over again, what is the destiny of it all? Death. What is there in your conception of life that doesn't die, isn't subject to death? And death is the consequence of our getting it wrong. So yes, we can spend a lot of time, praising ourselves, praising other people, but what for? Isn't it better to turn your attention to what is not going to die?
In my kitchen, John, I have got some hyacinths, and they have the most delicate, strong but delicate fragrance, which is a delight. But of course it's going to wilt and die. But that doesn't mean to say that the fragrance itself is not beautiful, meaningful, one might even say sacred in its moment. It's completely intentional. If you like, it's under law of beauty. Its innate nature is perfection. So it is going to die, but that's part of its beauty.
Well, there's no argument about that, Phil. No one would doubt that. But there's always more. There's always more. How about a hyacinth that does not die? Why should that beauty, that miracle that you behold in a hyacinth, why should it be here today and gone tomorrow? Why not have an eternal and a yet more glorious hyacinth? You see, we always, really the human condition is that we don't know any better. You know, we're like, think about a little child or think of a pig in a pigsty, you know. We talk about a pig in muck, don't we? You know, a poor pig, largely because of what we do to it, shutting it up in a little box called and expecting it to live there. It has to live amongst its own filth, eat off the floor. Well, we humans in many ways aren't much better. We're locked up in this prison of the flesh, condemned to work until we die. As I've often said, the human condition is like living on death row. And in its time, it's wonderful. You can be perfectly happy in a cell on death row. You can see if you've got a window, you can see sunlight on the floor and think it's wonderful. Well, it is. but there's something better, isn't there? This little box, which we tend to call human existence, is a limit, and that there is the possibility of an unlimited existence. I'll give you one good example. You know, human conversation can be very interesting up to a point, and then probably a lot of people find, I'm getting fed up with this, had enough of it, going round in circles, getting nowhere. And often it's a relief when it comes to an end, isn't it? You know, you listen to music and marvellous, lovely. Then there comes a time when you want to turn it off. You had enough. Even going round an art gallery, you usually had enough after an hour or two. Good food is enjoyment, but then you had enough, haven't you? Because the other thing what we really need to, and this becomes ever more clear as we have more spiritual experience, that you see, it's not only the human condition. You referred to a flower. You see, the whole nature also is tarred with the same brush of mortality. This again is all explained in the Bible, where, as God says, the world is cursed is the ground for thy sake. As many people are coming to realize now that the human footprint is a very questionable blessing indeed. It's more likely a curse, because this humanity is not what I am. What we are is unlimited spirit. But we have fallen from this unlimited spirit. If you think of it, it's like a raindrop, like water vapor condensing, falling as rain, forming a puddle, and the puddle getting frozen into ice. What we're looking at here is frozen spirit, if you like. Frozen of what I am. Therefore, it can't move. Well, ice is also beautiful, isn't it? But ice is ice, and Everyone sighs a relief usually when the ice melts and spring comes and green grass grows upon the earth. Perhaps that's a good note to end on. Sorry, Scotty, if I haven't answered you very well. I've wandered around a lot. It was rather a complicated question, but I hope you got the gist of it. God bless you, my dear. Do you know, there's no doubting. Sorry, I'm just going to ramble on a bit longer. There's no doubting that the human condition is loved, you see. This is stated over and over again in Scripture. God so loved the world. Of course one loves. If your best friend falls ill, you don't usually throw him on the rubbish heap. You usually look after him, don't you? And do your best. But when you feel the earth is in trouble, most of us, well, at least in these days, we're getting the message at last that the earth has is worth saving, and we're trying not to do so much damage to it. So, whatever state man is in, he's still lovable. Lovable and loved by the higher, whatever you refer to it, by God and by the higher faculties of man. Help one another, love your neighbour, and your neighbour is necessarily a spiritually advanced person. Your neighbour can be right at the bottom of the pit, can't he? Love your neighbour as yourself, because we're all in the ship together.
To balance out being in the shit together.
I said ship, not shit.
Oh! Slip of the tongue, John. Maybe I could just observe that original blessing came along a long time before original sin.
Well, man's original condition, of course, was blessed, yes, in paradise. So the Bible tells us. Well, then those of us who have spiritual experience can bear it out from our own experience, yes. If you meditate deeply enough and long enough, it's quite easy to experience. Maybe not the full Monty, but you get a taste of it.